No.
Now about 2 minutes away from the official deadline. Now, sometimes I say this with the provision that things happen and we find out about them after the deadline.
Sure. Right.
That'll inevitably happen today. But at the moment, it appears that Anthony Davis, as we guessed, is not going to be moved by the New Orleans Pelicans. If that's the case, how do you proceed here moving forward in terms of how much he's going to play? Should he be around the team? What do you say? Does he address the team? Does Alvin Gentry address the team? What are they telling the media? What's their policy moving forward? There's so many questions.
Well, I think definitely Dell Demps has to address the team and address the media, saying that we're going to not trade Anthony Davis and wait. Sekou, as an ex-player, I have mixed feelings because most of us have left school early to play a game we so dearly love. Now, I understand Anthony Davis is trying to take control of his career. But if you're healthy, I think you got to play. As a player, I know you're saying, oh, you don't want to get hurt, you don't want to do this. Well, you've been through so much in your career, you've been banged up enough. I'm saying to myself, I think you should play to prove to that team that you may go to over the summer that you can stay healthy and you still can be that guy we know you can be. So I'm stuck on the fence of, yes, maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to be in New Orleans. But come on, they're still paying you handsomely to play a game you love so much. I'm stuck, but as an ex-player, I'm saying go play.
And by the way, in his defense, there's no indication he doesn't want to play.
No,
he wants to play.
It goes both ways. The team right. So if he wants to play, let him play.
Have we hit 3 o'clock? We're really close. I still have 2:59.
We got 30 seconds. I got 30 seconds.
Right about there, man.
Now I'm told 3, 2, 1. Joe Barton from The Athletic tweeted before the deadline that Rich Paul says Davis is not being traded today. And so now we have the scenario we just laid out where the Pelicans have to decide what they're going to do, how they proceed for the next third of the season ahead.
They've been so sensitive about it since the trade request was made public.
Right.
You address it now this one time, and you better have a decision made. You don't want this thing to linger into All-Star weekend and beyond that. You've got an opportunity now to address this today. Put it in the past if you're the Pelicans. Say he's either playing or not. We'll talk to everybody again in July. Anthony Davis and his representatives have made his stance clear.
Right.
He does not plan on signing that Supermax. So his time in New Orleans, whether it's the next, 30 games, 29, 30 games?
27.
27. That's
27.
it. If he plays, great. If not, that's the end of his tenure with the Pelicans because we know they can't get to July and not move him in July.
Right.
All this does is kick the can down the road, and it adds Boston to the mix in terms of the offers and the negotiations that the Pelicans will go through to decide what's the best offer for Anthony Davis.
Guys, across the room, for you, we talked a little bit about this last night. What should the next 27 games and potentially postseason, if they were to climb out of the 13th spot and make it, what should that stretch look like for New Orleans?
I want to react to what 3D said because he was looking at it from a player perspective. And we could call it a nerd perspective, but I'll call it an executive perspective. So if you're in the executive suite, if you're an owner of the Pelicans, you made a $145 million commitment to Anthony Davis.
Right.
He is still owed $81 million of that if you factor in this year's money. And they throw this Molotov cocktail right in the middle of the team that made that commitment to him. So they have a responsibility now to behave and to show up and to be professional and to cut out all the crap. It didn't work, okay? You made a big mess. It didn't work right now. And there's a responsibility that goes with getting $145 million guaranteed. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think their intention has been all along, and they've said their intention is to play. I think they're well aware of the commitment that they've made and that they do owe that to the city, frankly, and to his teammates. I think Anthony knows that. Where this becomes really interesting is from a Pelicans perspective now. If you're Dell Demps, there's going to be a cadre of people in nerd caves just like this that are going to say you absolutely don't play Anthony Davis, whether he wants to play or not. That's really going to become problematic because keeping him healthy is meaningful. If we're talking about what that deal would look like moving forward, everybody focuses on Boston, which is fine. There are several teams that are making a playoff run right now that might put names into the hopper we're not even thinking about. So this is a risk-reward thing for Dell Demps and the Pelicans where they have to decide what does it look like for us if he gets injured and we're not able to capitalize on that market, it's a very delicate position to be in.
Yeah, I'm not surprised there wasn't a deal here, because what they want back is multiple young assets, right? And if you're going to get multiple young assets, the time to do that is in the summer, as you well know, because the draft picks are now defined. You know who has what picks, and your personnel folks can also tell you who the heck you can get at those picks. So it's easier to sell it internally and to the public when you can get multiple youngs, and with the way so many other players will be in motion, it's much more likely to occur in the summer. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, for sure. And to comment on something Sekou said earlier about the Boston young assets not being clearly better than the Laker young assets, I think there's a situation, Sekou, where you look at it, it's not just how much do you love Jason Tatum. It's how much do you love Jason Tatum in aggregation with, let's say, Marcus Smart, who you could pair with Drew Holiday moving forward. Maybe you like that better than multiple young players, because maybe they look at their nucleus in New Orleans and say, if you give us something like that, we're still highly competitive in the here and now.
And in the meantime, 27 games to go, as we said. This is not an unprecedented situation. There have been plenty of lame duck potential free agents or guys whose situation made it clear that they weren't long for their organizations. There are ways to deal with this, good and bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, the only problem is, think about some of the situations that have been like this, where you didn't move the guy. You know, Paul George got moved. Kawhi Leonard got moved. Kyrie got moved. These guys all got moved when it was clear they didn't want to be where they were. Right. One of those places where you didn't have the time or the energy to get it done was Orlando. When Dwight Howard made it clear that he didn't want to be there anymore,
right.
They're still digging out from that. This is a potential catastrophic situation for the team that loses a player of Anthony Davis's caliber. You know, how do you replace what he brings? And clearly the Pelicans are not a playoff team even. They're not a team that has elevated to another level with Anthony Davis, but the potential for it has always been there with him in place. Now, what is your building block if you're the Pelicans? What are you selling in terms of a vision of how you rebound from this, other than the hope of these young assets you're going to get from someone else? The other part about that is Niko Mirotic is gone.
Right.
Drew Holiday remains. What are you asking him to do the remainder of this season now if Anthony Davis doesn't play?
Right.
All of these different things, the pressures you're putting on different players, the coach, Alvin Gentry, and his staff, how they manage this. And Griff and Tom both bring up something very interesting from that front office perspective. You've got to manage this narrative now, not only to the public, but now you got to answer to the owners. Like, you got to make the owners believe that we're going to get out of this in a way or in a fashion that's going to keep the owner feeling good about what that next step is.
Light at the end of the tunnel, I promise
you. And that might be
you.
even more difficult than the public management of a situation.
And by the way, a relatively new owner in Gail Benson, who took over after the death of her husband, Tom Benson, who hasn't obviously been through this before in New Orleans.
Now, what is Rich Paul telling LeBron James tonight? LeBron, you're back. You're telling us you're about, what, 80, 85%. Now, can you get close to 100% mentally? They're being traded. They weren't being traded.
Yeah.
When LeBron was healthy, they were in the 4th seed.
Right.
So how do you get that mentally back, physically back? And those young guys are sitting over there like, man, I thought I was being traded. So now LeBron's back. LeBron, how much do you have in your tank? Griff, you've been around LeBron. LeBron, can you elevate these young guys psychologically and say, guys, I'm back. Let's get back to playing the basketball we were playing before I got hurt. Let's take a run at it. Is that conversation going to be had, Matt?
I don't know if the conversation will be had. I find it hard to believe that if LeBron is healthy the rest of the way, that they're not a playoff team, particularly in light of what the Clippers have done with their roster here over the last few hours. Clippers holding the 8th spot at the moment. The Lakers are just 2.5 games back, 54 games into their season, so another 28 games to go for them.
I wonder if it's worth it, and I would love to hear what everybody else thinks about this. Is it worth it to be a sacrificial lamb in that 8th spot if you're the Lakers for the Warriors?
Right.
What that does. Is it that important for those young guys to get that playoff experience? I would say yes.
Yeah.
I would say yes. In the absence of a deal done, you get them the experience they need, and you let them at least taste some of that playoff action.